New Orleans, Louisiana. So we're looking forward to seeing what kind of party they can throw here in Reno, guys. We're excited that you could make it out here today, especially with the beautiful snowy weather. However, unfortunately, with inclement weather, we've had some delays in some of our speakers coming in today. So, at a national organization with bountiful talent out there, we've reached out and we've been able to adapt to this situation. So this morning, we're going to have Mr. Jim Richardson. It's going to fill in as our keynote speaker. Jim was scheduled to be at the luncheon speaker, so we're fortunate to have Jim here this morning to fill us in on his activities. And we'll also have the opportunity to have Mr. Bill Buckner at our luncheon today to fill us in on what's going on with the Salt Health Institute. So we surely want to thank these individuals for being flexible and stepping up to the plate and assisting us in this, what I would call a modification of the program this morning. This year's 70th annual meeting is focused on the theme of historic legacy guiding a brighter future, and will highlight the importance of conservation planning and the need to work with partnerships within our districts, agencies, states, regions, and organizations in advancing natural resource conservation in the future. You know, as I travel around the nation as your president for the last 2 years prior to Lee taking his position, I often said, can you imagine the foresight of our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents to set up such a great delivery system in America, the envy of the world in getting conservation on the ground. So we can be proud of it. We can look back at this meeting a little bit and view what we've done, and we can look forward into the future and how we think it will go forward. So you'll have that opportunity this week to do all of that as part of the annual meeting of the National Association of Conservation Districts. This week we have a tremendous opportunity of being surrounded by conservation leaders from across the great nation. I hope you'll take full advantage of the time to network, learn, ask questions, and go back home equipped with new information and ideas to share with your local districts and community. Before we get started with the program, please join me in thanking our friends from Nevada for all the hospitality and help in making this meeting a great experience. As we move forward in the program here this morning, we again had a change in vacation. The Washoe tribe has not arrived at this time, and we would hope that they would make it into the meeting before we're finished, and we'll have the opportunity to have a presentation from them. But at this time, I will call on a member officer or previous past president, Mr. Gene Schmidt, and I'm sure all of you know Gene, to come forward and give us the invocation. Gene?
Please join me in reflection. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to bring this group together and truly acknowledge the gracious and precious landscape that you have bestowed upon us. As we look upon that pristine picture, help us understand the responsibility you've given us to continually dedicate ourselves with your help through wisdom and passion and knowledge to make the improvements in the directions and the accomplishments that you've given us the opportunity to achieve. Be with us, guide us, give us the strength and the understanding that you truly can feel comfortable that you've bestowed an opportunity for us to be the custodians of something that is so wonderful. Appreciate the opportunity. Bless this group, but most of all, Lord, thank you for the opportunity. In your holy name, amen.
Thank you, Gene, for a wonderful invocation here this morning. At this time, now, please stand as Mr. Noah Foist sings the national anthem. Noah, would you?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Noah, and that's a beautiful presentation, and we really appreciate you being here today. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Jake Tibbetts, the president of the Nevada Association of Conservation Districts, to come forward to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Jake.
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Go ahead and be seated. Well, we were a little nervous about the weather this morning, and typical with many of our congressional delegates, they wait till the last minute, they slip in the back door, make you nervous. And but I am very happy that Congressman Mark Amodei did show up, and thank you, Congressman. Mark Amodei, he's a Republican from Carson City, Nevada. He's born in Carson City. I won't give the dates. We won't disclose how old he is. He received his education, his bachelor's from the University of Nevada, Reno, his law degree from University of Pacific McGeorge School of Law. He is a sole practitioner for his own law firm now. He's a past president of the Nevada Mining Association. Worked for many different law firms over his career. He's a past Nevada State Assemblyman, a past or former Nevada State Senator, President Pro Temp for the Nevada State Senate. He's a member of the Colorado River Commission, a member of the Uniform State Law Commission, a member of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency Legislative Oversight Committee, and he has 2 children. He was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2011, and he's a member of the House Appropriations Committee. So as you can tell from this laundry list of items, Congressman Amodei is a true Renaissance man. I've had the chance to break bread with the congressman and drink a few pecans over time. If you don't know what that is, you shouldn't leave Nevada until you know what a pecan is. But that's definitely a story for a different time. But I can guarantee you that the congressman, he's a hardcore red-blooded Nevadan. And he's also a strong advocate for locally led and wise use of our conservation of our natural resources. So please join me in welcoming Congressman Mark Amodei.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Nevada President, for that warm welcome. It's always nice to be kind of translated to, well, he's kind of an asshole, but he's here on time, so let's let him up. Wouldn't have expected anything else from you, Jake, baby. Thanks for helping me relax a little bit. It's always nice to be here at the National Association of Chain Drugstores. Oh yeah, that's later. Okay, got it. I understand your national president's from Louisiana. I want to apologize to you. I don't know what the hell's going on here. We've abolished winter the last 3 or 4 seasons, and for some reason we're going to have it this year. Joe Sicking, who's another Renaissance man from Nevada who happens to be affiliated with this organization, was saying, Jake's on pins and needles, didn't know if you were going to get here. And I said, well, unlike high-ranking Eureka County officials, I had to shovel my own driveway, drive myself in, avoid a bunch of pilgrims from California. No offense to you folks, thank you very much. Please keep coming to places like this and gambling. And I got here before the pledge. The whole 9 yards. So anyhow, I'm feeling pretty lucky. I think I'll stick around. I guess your keynote speaker isn't going to make it, so we're going to combine both of these into one, kind of keep the program moving. I would be remiss if I didn't say, though, hey, thanks for coming to Reno. We'll try to get you some better weather before you leave. And I also want to ask you for a little bit of help. I've been in this job for 52 months and 15 days, but who's counting? In that time, I have come to the conclusion, I'm not a fast learner, but if you give me enough time, then I figure a few things out maybe, that resource use, issues that people outside the urban areas of this country, the issues that they face are still one of the most misunderstood things in Washington, D.C. Because they looked at the inner city stuff. We talk about what happens in Baltimore. We talk about what happens in New York City. We talk about L.A. We talk about Chicago. We talk about all that. That's all well and good. But when you talk about the impact of something like Waters of the U.S. has, when you talk about 404 permits, when you talk about air quality, when you talk about, hey, by the way, we're going to make this a national monument, or this is the new phrase with my close personal friends at the Fish and Wildlife Service, oh, it's not about numbers or population anymore, it's about fragmentation and loss of habitat. And for those of you that haven't experienced it, that can mean just about whatever you want it to mean. And so, as we go through this process, I'll just share a short story with you that will bring me back to, we need your help. And the reason that we need your help is groups like this that have been around forever, people who make their living through responsible use of natural resources, know the issues better than the people who make the policy. People who make their living through the responsible use of natural resources know the issues better than the people who are making the policies. I know it's frustrating. You're going, how the hell could they do that? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And, sad but true, you're right. But changing that knowledge into action at the policymaking level, whether it's in your community, whether it's in your state, or whether it's back in the swamp, is the challenge that, quite frankly, I got to tell you, I'm a little, I'm frustrated. We'll just leave it at that. That's a nice word. I'm frustrated. And here's the story. So we get ready to do this omnibus thing last December. It's like, okay, and if there's anybody here who's a member of the United States Senate, let me just say this. I know that members of the Senate are better looking. I know they're richer. I know they're smarter. And I know that they all have at least a high school diploma. The House, we all have at least a GED. But anyhow, but when you get ready to do this omnibus thing, which is funding the government, two problems. When you announce to somebody that you absolutely positively will not shut the government down, not that that's what anybody aspires to, what that produces is, well, we're just going to wait till about a week before we run out of Schlitz, and then we're going to see if they really mean it. And guess what? You say, why is he telling us that? Because of the omnibus. Rob Bishop, chairman of Natural Resources Committee in the House, from Utah, been there for a long time, great guy, knows more about resources than most people have forgotten, gets it, works very hard. First Congress as the chairman, succeeding Doc, where's the Washington? Hastings, Doc Hastings. Don't tell him I forgot his name, but if you're going to forget somebody's name, it's good if you do it after they're out of Congress. Anyhow, great job, did some wonderful work. Interior Appropriations, Ken Calvert from California. We got Mike Simpson from Idaho, Chris Stewart from Utah, myself from Nevada. We've got a couple of, David Joyce from Ohio, that we say, no offense to you Ohio people, it's like, if you're from the Midwest, that means not the West. I know. There you go. Well, that's okay. You guys have better duck hunting, so don't be stingy. So anyhow, great group of folks, do all sorts of work, bunch of riders, cut EPA's funding. Not that anybody's against the environment, but they're against the politicization of the environment. You ever notice that everything that gets politicized gets destroyed? You know, education used to be about school boards and folks like that, and now it's about stuff. It's like, God, we fight about education all the time. Healthcare used to be about getting the best possible deal, and whatever, that's been politicized. It's a mess. But I digress. Great group of folks to handle resource issues, coal, grazing, livestock, food stuff, XM Bank, all these sorts of things that affect people who produce from resources. And guess what happens in the omnibus? We're not going to shut the government down. Well, okay, I get that. So, the other side, I say with respect, the other side basically sits there and goes, hey, it's getting December, Christmas, Thanksgiving was good, but you're going to throw all these people? No, we're not going to do that. What came out in the omnibus was essentially the total abolishment of all of the work product of Rob Bishop's Natural Resources Committee and Ken Calvert's Interior Appropriations Subcommittee. Now, here in Nevada, we have a bird called the sage hen. Those of you from the Midwest call it sage grouse. Grouse is something you do when you're pissed or you don't want to yell. You just grouse about it. So anyhow, we have sage hens here, chickens if you live in Tibbetts' neighborhood. And so anyhow, I'd been working really hard on that. Like, hey, we can't let these guys put this stuff into their resource management plans because blah, 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 and all this. So we do all this stuff. Bishop's working on it, everybody. All of it's gone. One fell swoop. We have a meeting with the speaker. Where's the Wisconsin folks? Where's the cheeseheads? Good guy, but I need you to, are they here? Right here. Okay, good guy, but I need you to spend some time with him. Honesty's a great thing. So we go in and we've got folks from New Mexico, Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming. We sit down with the speaker's staff afterwards and we look at this omnibus. We haven't voted on it yet, but it's like, hey, what the hell happened to all the resource stuff produced by these two committees? And Paul, to his credit, he goes, you know what? I don't know much about the West. Not that he did it. I mean, he made the final decisions, but his staff's sitting there. So anyhow, we have a meeting with his staff afterwards, and Steve from New Mexico, Pierce, great guy, spiritual guy. Cynthia Lummis kind of raises her voice when we're talking to the chief of staff and the chief policy guy and all that other sort of stuff, and she turns it over to Steve because she's got to go upstairs to a rules committee thing. And Steve Pierce opens the thing up talking to the speaker's staff. He goes, you people don't know a goddamn thing about the West. And I'm kind of chafing over. They're like, come on, we got to, and he opens up with that, and I just kind of leaned back in my chair and went, shit, I think this is going to be okay. So, long story short, Paul Ryan says, I've got work to do. I'm going to try to make it up to you, blah, 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 this session, all that other sort of stuff. Good guy, great communicator. But we have work to do. You guys have work to do. If the folks from Wisconsin need any help, help them. Those of you from the other 49 states, it's like, listen, get with your folks. I mean, I know they don't get to ESA stuff on Fox News or MSNBC or all the folks that are the smartest people in the universe and all that other sort of stuff, but it's time to renew the commitment to making sure that the people who know the most about resources are those who make their living using them, and quite frankly, guys like me come and go, but your businesses, your culture, your way of life endures. And there's a problem right now, and we need to fix it. It's not the end of the world. Don't even go, God, that was a downer. It's like, hey, we got some wood in front of us. We need to chop it. If you want to have a big carbon footprint and use a big chainsaw, fine with me. But we got to chop the wood in front of us. So anyhow, I want to thank you, Jake, for inviting me to do this. I'm sure you'll never invite me again. But that's okay. I won't say anything about your drinking problem in front of all your colleagues or anything else like that. So, you know, should have been a little nicer in that introduction, Jake, buddy. Look forward to seeing you at the 4th of July parade in Eureka. I'm sure I'll be in jail to see if I can see it from your nice new facility there. But anyhow, enough's enough. I got to get out there and see if I can't hit somebody. Since I didn't hit anybody driving in, I don't want to get on the airplane and go back to low altitude without some sort of body damage, at least on my rigatoni. But anyhow, thank you very much. Have a good time. You got a great facility here. Thank you for coming to Reno. Welcome to Nevada's original congressional district. They may have number 1 down in Vegas. No offense to you folks from south of Tonopah, if any of you are here, but this is where it all started before. Vegas used to be part of Arizona. Are the Arizona people here? You didn't even thank us for taking them off your hands. Yeah. You know, some days that's hard stuff. Anyhow, thank you very much. Anything you folks need from the bottom of the totem pole, you know where to find me, and have a good time here in Reno, and hopefully we can warm it up a little bit for you. Go conservation.
Hey, great presentation. You know, I'm beginning to think maybe Nevada knows how to party like New Orleans. So thank you, Congressman. We appreciate it. All right. Well, we really appreciate that welcome, and you can see that Nevada is glad to have us here. So to continue that effort, I would like to call now on Mr. Kevin Roque, a commissioner from the Nevada State Commission, to come forward and lead the Assembly of States, and Mr. Jake Tibbetts, the president, will also join him and welcome him in each state. So, Kevin.
Thank God they alphabetized them for me. All the folks to my left have one thing in common, or a couple things in common. They're either the most active people in the state or they drew the short straw. So first up, I have a representative from Alabama. That's not the model we want for the rest of the performance. Alaska. American Samoa. Arizona. And our neighbors to the west, California. Oh, I missed one. I'm sorry. Arkansas. He's a little further east. Maybe I better check these off as I read them. Now California. Colorado. Oh, sure, now he brings out the shirt. Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. Because I'm originally from the East, Connecticut. Delaware. District of Columbia. The Federated States of Micronesia. Florida. Georgia. Guam. Hawaii. Idaho. Illinois. Indiana. Iowa. Kansas.
Good morning, everyone.
Kentucky. Louisiana. Maine. Maryland. My home Borns Plate, Massachusetts. Go Patriots. Michigan. Minnesota. Mississippi. Missouri. Montana. Nebraska. Loud clapping to follow. Nevada. New Hampshire. New Jersey. New Mexico. New York. North Carolina. Why did I sense that was coming? North Dakota.
Go Bison.
Ohio. Oklahoma. Oregon. The Republic of Palau. Pennsylvania. Puerto Rico. Rhode Island. South Carolina. South Dakota. Tennessee. Big, it has to be big because it's Texas is next. Utah. Oh wait, did I got Texas? Texas. Utah. Vermont. Virgin Islands. Virginia. Washington. West Virginia. Wisconsin. And finally, Wyoming. Let's give a round of applause to our state and territory representatives.
Gee, I realize I got a little side benefit here, and thank Hawaii for this. This is great. Yeah, I don't know where Jake is. I tried to get him up here, but so you see Jake, wherever you are, you missed it. All right, well, this is great. What a showing of conservation out there to support what we're doing in the national level. So we surely want to take this opportunity that Nevada has given us to work and unify here at the convention so we accomplish great things. So I think there's truly a bright future ahead of us. We want to thank Nevada for the great gift bags that they give each state that they're taking with them here this morning. So let's give them one more big hand. Thank you. It's always exciting to have the Assembly of States and to see our members coming into an annual meeting each year. You know, it shows that our states feel like it's important to be at the annual meeting of their National Association of Conservation Districts. And as I traveled around, that was one of the messages I tried to deliver. NACD is your national organization. Your officers, your executive board work in your behalf to represent you every day out there, and we hope we do a good job of it. But don't feel like it's an organization in the sky. It is your organization. You are NACD, and you would, more participation that each supervisor can give, the stronger this organization will be out there in America. So we got that footprint that nobody else can offer. I think we need to be proud of it. I think we need to make it stronger if we can, and I think a meeting like this will help us do that as we move forward. And now it's my great privilege to ask the NACD President, Mr. Lee McDaniel, to join me on the stage for the presentation of the President's address. And as Lee comes up, I'd like to make a couple of comments. Lee came into his position in New Orleans last year and had quite a few things that changed as the year progressed this past year. Lee is a leader that I think is steady. He's a good thinker. He's a great decision maker. And I think he did an excellent job this past year handling all the changes that occurred at your national organization. So Lee, welcome, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, here I am again following Earl Garber. Wherever I go, I'm following Earl Garber, and it's always a tough act to follow. So, Earl, I certainly appreciate everything you've done for me this year, your mentorship and so forth to help me get through this year. So I just wanted to personally thank you for that. Before I get into my comments here, there's a few people that I'd like to thank, and they'll probably get thanked again before this meeting's over. And that's the people that I've worked with this past year on a regular basis. My executive board, if you'd please stand up, I'd like to recognize you for all the help you've given me. And also the people that help all of us every day, and the ones that have helped make this convention go forward as well as it has, with some of the gremlins that have been out there bothering us. It's our staff, and all of them aren't in the room, but those of the staff that are in the room, please let us recognize you and pass it on to those that are still out working in other places. We appreciate the job that you do for us every day of the year, plus this annual meeting. Thank you. And I think this is the first time ever, at least that's what I've been told, we have 7 past presidents at this annual meeting. I don't think they're all in the room, but those of you who are here, could you please stand up and be recognized? It shows real dedication of after the fact, you still come back and help us. Thank you. Now, I think they're all here because they know I need all the help I can get, so I appreciate it as well. So thanks for being here. Now, I would like to address this year's theme, Historical Legacy Guiding a Brighter Future. Last year was a year of reflection and celebration for our districts. It was the 80th anniversary of Hugh Hammond Bennett's appearance before Congress as the dust cloud from the west descended on the Capitol that established the Soil Conservation Service, now the NRCS, and created enabling legislation that created the nation's conservation districts. Last year, the United States Senate unanimously passed a resolution supporting locally led, voluntary incentive-based conservation as part of this 80th anniversary celebration. I thank everyone who helped us get that resolution passed. It wouldn't have passed if it wasn't for our dedication and our hard work to get those senators to support that. So thank you very much for helping us get that done. 2015 was also designated by the United Nations as the International Year of Soils. NACD was able to distribute our soil health materials throughout the world in 6 different languages through the Food and Agriculture Organization. So now that we have celebrated our historical legacy, it's time to look at that brighter future. The demographics of the country has changed in many ways since 1935. There is a much smaller percentage of people living on farms, and that farm population is much more diverse, with more women and minorities now being involved with decision-making on farm operations. Nearly 40% of all farmland is now rented in the United States, over 60% in many of our prime farmland areas, which means many operators have a short-term view of land management. The absentee owners often look at land simply as an investment and have no direct connection to the land. This means districts must find ways to connect to these owners and operators in a way that will make conservation a priority for this segment. Nearly all districts are faced with development issues, and there's a new interest in urban agriculture where there are soil health and conservation issues that districts should address. Forestry management and conservation of forested lands continues to be an area that districts are involved. Then there are the 98% of the population that is not directly involved with agriculture, and we must find ways to reach out to that group in order for districts to be sustainable in the future. Finally, we cannot ignore the conservation issues on our public lands. My farm in Maryland has a state park adjacent to it on the north and a military base adjacent to it to the south. So I have firsthand knowledge how public land management affects my operation. I'm pleased to announce that I have established a Public Lands RPG to address public land conservation issues. This committee, along with our Forestry RPG, Urban and Community RPG, and our Natural Resources Policy Committee, positions NACD well as we move into the future. As we look to the future, it seems obvious that we must find ways to reach that 98% that are not involved with production agriculture. This does not mean we turn our backs on our traditional cooperators. Actually, we may be able to help them even more if we have the backing of the general population. However, a 2% base will most likely not carry the day in Congress, so there is a need to find ways to administer conservation to the entire population. We've had a slogan for some time that every acre counts. Not only does every acre count, but in order to be successful, every person counts as well. So what is NAC doing to address these issues and prepare for the future? NACD has partnered with the Noble Foundation to create a District Outlook report. This effort was started by immediate past President Earl Garber, and the task force continues to work on a report. The task force will be hosting a breakout session here in Reno to get your input as district officials on how districts can improve on conservation delivery system at the local level. We look forward to your participation and ideas. This year, we will also be kicking off our long-range planning update for NACD. There are some who do not think that locally led voluntary incentive-based approach is the best way to get conservation on the ground. They see 3,000 different business models and seem to think that it is an inefficient system because they're used to having a top-down approach. Our strength is in our knowledge of the local land and its managers and the trust that has been developed over the last 80 years. Districts have the ability to provide specific prescription conservation to the land, not some cookie-cutter approach that would have to be done at the macro conservation level. We need a long-range plan that is effective in getting this message across to the entire population. We have the world's best conservation delivery system, but it cannot continue to be a secret known only to ourselves. So what should you be doing as local leaders? As we look to the future, I'm challenging every conservation district in America to review and update your long-range plan. If you don't have one, then when you get back home, make it a priority to create a long-range plan. As you review and develop a long-range plan, ask these questions. Are you addressing the conservation needs of your entire community? Do we represent the diversity that exists in our community? Are our legislators aware of the work that we do, and do we have an ongoing relationship with them? Are there other conservation opportunities in our community that we are not addressing? Are we telling our story to the public? If you can answer yes to these questions, you will then be well on your way to having a successful long-range plan. NACD needs to have a long-range plan that can positively answer these questions as well. Finally, NACD can only be as strong as our districts, our state associations, and our partners. So we all need to work together at law levels for us to be the conservation delivery system in America. Thank you for your attention. Let's get out there and get the job done.
Thank you, Lee, for those guiding words, and looking at our theme and for the brighter future. And it's we are doing a lot of work. You are busy, and just like Lee spelled out, as far as for the long-range plan, District Outlook Task Force, and so hopefully when we come together on this over the next year, you will have a brighter future for conservation districts. Because remember, there are other individuals, other organizations that would like to fill our shoes. I think it's important that we drive forward and make sure that conservation districts in America stay the leader in the natural resource arena. So thank you, Lee. Lee, on a daily basis, he lives pretty close to the national office, and that was very beneficial this year. But he still needs an individual that can run the daily activities of NACD, can guide the staff to accomplish the goals that you ask of your officers and your national organization. We have an individual this year that took a hold of the reins. Young, energetic, very steady-handed. At this time, I'd like to call on Mr. Jeremy Peters to come up and give us the CEO address to NACD. Jeremy?
Thank you, Earl. Good morning, NACD. That's good. Everyone's awake and ready to go. Well, welcome to Reno and to the 2016 NACD annual meeting. I'll get these waters down here. I'm afraid I'm going to knock them off. I'm Jeremy Peters, NACD's Chief Executive Officer, and I want to thank each of you for being here, in spite of the weather. I know many folks had some difficulties getting in and some harrowing flights into the airport, so thank you for your persistence and for being here today. It's so good to look out and see such a full room of Conservation District folks that are here to participate in your annual meeting. We have so much in store for you, and I want to wish everybody a great meeting. We have an action-packed agenda, an impressive lineup of speakers, and excellent breakouts, exhibitors, symposia, and tours. I hope you'll take advantage of everything your annual meeting has to offer. Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to start with just a little story and also some recognition for some folks. We did a staff retreat at the end of 2015 and got the national staff together out at a 4-H retreat center just outside of Washington, D.C. And we spent the first day together outside doing some team building exercises and getting the new staff and the more seasoned staff together and doing the team building that's so critical to having a strong national team. So we spent the whole day out doing ropes courses and different exercises at this 4-H center. It's a beautiful day, one of the last nice days of summer. So it was a little warm. You know, we had some fun. We played together, sweated together. And we got up the next morning to start our actual retreat and meetings and discussions. And we turned on the water to get ready, and there was not a drop to be had. Now, we spent the day before sweating and having some fun and doing the team building exercises. And so I'm talking with the staff, and they said, "Is this just the next challenge that you're expecting us to do?" But that gives you just a little insight into the resilience, the team that you've got working for your national association. We're used to rolling with the punches. Even some snow out here. I thought I left the snow behind in D.C. last week, but daggone it followed me. But your national staff does such a great job. And before I start my remarks, just wanted to, again, recognize the national staff. So let's give them a big hand. Also want to thank the 2016 Annual Meeting Planning Committee for their efforts putting together another great annual meeting. Special thanks to NACD past president Earl Garber for your steady leadership in helping pull off another great annual meeting. You've been just instrumental and key to this whole process, so thank you. Also like to thank NACD board member Barbara Perlman-Wyman, Nevada Association President Jake Tibbetts, and Nevada Association Executive Director Andy Perchea. Please stand. All those folks I just recognized, please stand. Let's give them a big hand. Along with the staff, these folks have logged countless hours, emails, teleconferences. So all of the great experiences you have this week is to their credit. Are my slides working? There we go. And thanks to our meeting sponsors. Your support of this meeting is a tremendous investment in the future of conservation. So if you're a sponsor in the room today, please stand and be recognized. Thank you. As President McDaniel alluded, 2015 was without a doubt a year of transition. We brought on several new staff members who I hope you'll get to know here. We had a newly elected officer team, a new CFO firm, a new CEO. Whew. I get a little tired just standing here talking about it. Just reflecting back on all we accomplished. Lee, maybe next year let's think about getting Starbucks or Red Bull also up on that screen. We need them as a sponsor. We're giving them enough business. While 2015 was a transitional year in many ways, NACD still maintained a steady and unwavering focus on the core of our mission, and that is to serve conservation districts by providing national leadership and a unified voice for natural resource conservation. That's what it's all about. That focus is why NACD was highly successful in a number of areas. Conservation did well in Congress last year, and our 2015 legislative advocacy was successful in securing increases for each of our funding priorities. That is a big deal. Considering the environment that we've been in from a budget standpoint, that is a big deal. This success will mean more technical assistance to landowners at the local level and more conservation on the land. We also help secure emergency funding to assist with recovery and reclamation efforts in the wake of 2015's record floods and wildfire season. That's also a big deal. Together, we secured more than $1.5 billion in technical and emergency funding. And that number does not even include Farm Bill financial assistance, which we also, with the exception of slight cut to EQIP, we also protected from cuts. So whether you participated in the annual legislative fly-in, called your representatives, or met with them back at home, you should feel good knowing that together we made a difference. So thank you. In 2015, NACD launched our new Soil Health Champions Network. The Soil Health Champions are part of a growing network of landowners that are at the forefront of promoting soil health nationally and in their communities. They are working with NACD to help us communicate the latest information on soil health, including best practices, science, and research. This group presents a remarkable opportunity to increase awareness and adoption of soil health to an even greater level. And I have to tell you, the bar is pretty high already, so we've got a great group together to help us do this. Will our soil health champions that are in attendance also please stand and be recognized? And they had a great discussion yesterday. We had a meet and greet for these folks, the first time that they've been together face to face. Fantastic energy and discussion in the room. So I'm looking forward to all the potential that this group has. NACD also had an international presence in 2015, partnering with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations to deliver electronically the popular DIGIT, The Secrets of Soil Educational Materials, in multiple languages, including English, French, Spanish, Italian, Chinese, Arabic, and Russian. As a result, the Conservation District message truly spanned the globe. We remain focused on our mission. We continue to transition in 2016, making your national association as financially strong and nimble as possible. In addition to bringing on a new accounting team to further strengthen our budget and financial management process, we're also transitioning across all of our programs to greater electronic delivery of materials. This will not only improve our economic performance, it will also open doors to existing as well as new audiences never reached before, to share the conservation message while ensuring we stretch every dollar as far as it will go. President McDaniel called me nearly a year ago with the opportunity to step up as your next CEO. And Lee, I'm forever grateful for that call and the trust that you placed in me along with NACD's executive board. So thank you all. But I also owe you big time, because almost immediately this thing started ringing and it hasn't stopped ever since. So let's also maybe think about Verizon and AT&T next year about some sponsorships. We're giving them a lot of business too. But I'm grateful each of those calls and each message, because it is a pulse of this organization. It means that you care. Whether calling to share good news or with help to solve a problem, or just when someone needs to talk. I'm glad for each call, because I know it means the person cares about their national association. And it is taking time, and that person's taking time to communicate to me something important. That sentiment is not unlike what your district experiences at the local level. Landowners and cooperators calling or walking through the doors of the district office are doing so because they care, and they have something important to share. They care about the land, and they're seeking assistance to do something about it. But like you, I worry about the ones that never call or never walk through that door or attend their national meeting or participate through membership. Why are they not calling? What is it that's keeping them from engaging? I hope it's because they're just fine. I truly do. But deep down, I worry. I worry it's because they can't, or because they won't, or maybe that they're just indifferent. Again, I hope it's that they're fine and well, but I know those things worry you too. We have to build stronger connections and reach out to each other more. So let's make sure the communication lines are open and help us get the NACD message out to build stronger connections across the country. We want to hear from you. I want you to call my phone. Keep it ringing. Call your national staff. It gives me hope for the future of NACD every time my telephone rings. And there are even more opportunities for engagement, participating in meetings, teleconferences. I know we hold plenty of those. Whew. Webinars, signing up for NACD's weekly e-resource, responding to legislative action alerts. The opportunities are abundant to engage with your national association and us with you. I would like to close with a quote from Henry Ford. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. I appreciate you taking time away from family, from friends, and from your work to participate in your annual meeting. Showing up and being together like this is important. And equally important is maintaining the unified voice that you take home to share with members that couldn't be here. And each of you are here today working together because you care and you want success. So I hope you leave here even more energized, the snow cooperating with us, and inspired than ever before for conservation and for the future success of NACD and conservation districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And just as I indicated when I introduced him, Jeremy is steady, he is relentless, and the energy that he keeps going every day in behalf of NACD is somewhat amazing. Jeremy started his career early as part of NACD and went out and gained a great deal of experience, and we were very thankful when he came back last fall. We were able to bring him back into the fold and be part of our leadership of NACD. So Jeremy, thank you for the efforts you've put in this year on such a short notice, and Lee, for all the work you've put in on such a short notice of change. So let's give these two a round of a hand together, because I think it's really important that they succeed. Okay, we have the opportunity this morning to have an individual with us that we are really excited about. Mr. Jim Richardson is a photographer and a documentarian specializing in global issues and recognized for his exploration of life in remote parts of the world. His first story for National Geographic magazine was published in 1985. And he has since been credited for more than 30 stories, with more in the works. Richardson's recent work has focused on the challenges of the world food production, care of native grasslands, and threats to the night sky and clean water. These stories have taken him around the world and into the lives of people dealing with the issues on the landscape. From scientists and public policymakers to property owners and daily observers. In addition to his work for the National Geographic, Richardson is a sought-after keynote presenter. His topics range from environmental issues, such as world food production, grasslands, soil, to leadership qualities as witnessed in the life of small Kansas town. He also is a contributing editor for National Geographic's Traveler magazine with a 30-year history of coverage. Jim's work has won National Environmental Journalism, Travel Writing, and Photography and Professional Achievement Awards. In 2014, Photographer of the Year as chosen by his photographer colleagues at the National Geographic. So please help me in welcoming Mr. Jim Richardson. Jim?
Thank you, Earl. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, it is a pleasure to be here this morning with you all, and I know I always worry. I'm from Kansas, you know, and so I'm one of those people who always feels kind of like Garrison Keillor says, you know, you're one of the dim bulbs on Life marquee, you know, you're not one of those people, those fast coastal people, you know, so I'm always surprised when people would come out when they had something better they could be doing, and by gosh, you could be out pulling slot machines, and here you are listening to me, so I don't know what I think of your intelligence in that case. We'll see how it works out here, I guess, you know. I wanted to start out this morning, you ought to have some, besides what Earl said. Now, I really appreciate being here with all of you folks from the NACD. Earl, thanks for that wonderful introduction. I guess that don't sound so bad when you put it that way, so I feel better now, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you who spend so much time dealing with conservation, thinking about the land, thinking how it should be used, how it shouldn't be used, and guarding that great heritage. So, but when it comes to why you should be listening to somebody who's just been a photographer all his life for National Geographic, well, I want to start out here with one image. Can you put me on screen up there, guys? Yeah, there you go. So, this is me bucket feeding a calf in 1953. So, anybody out there ever bucket fed a calf? Oh my gosh, look at those hands going up. We're a glorious group here, aren't we? We're members of a club. You know, we became citizens of the world when we took on that responsibility of feeding another being, didn't we? You know, it's something gets into you when you do that kind of stuff. And I grew up on a farm there in Kansas, and a great experience that it was. One-room school, the whole bit, you know, all that. Walked 6 miles to school in the blizzards, you know, all the stuff that you do. Yeah? So when Jeremy and Earl came and asked if I could switch out from the noontime meeting this morning. Oh, by the way, I want to step back one thing. The Kansas delegation is here, right? Oh, look at all of them. Yeah, you know, that's the best place in the world to live, isn't it? Yeah. You know, the second best place to live is not Nebraska. It's Palau. Where's the Palau delegation? Did I see Palau in this bunch? Look at that. Do you mean you came from Palau out in the Pacific? Do you mean that? Wow, out there with the lagoon with the jellyfish that you swim with, all that stuff? Is that, yeah? No? Okay, my gosh, I'm amazed, you know. Thank you for being here when part of all this, you know. So yeah, it feels a little like being at home here, being able to talk to you about something I care a lot about. And so when Jeremy asked me if I could switch out and talk to you, first off, I thought we ought to start off the morning with something pretty, something we believe in. And so I wanted to go and start with this image. This image along St. Mary's Ridge, up there in Wisconsin, on the Croon Creek watershed. This has great history. That's the Mansky farm down there. That's one of the very farms that the new Soil Conservation Service came to. Coon Creek watershed in the 20s was one of the most eroded landscapes in America. It was chosen for this pilot project of soil conservation because it had the chance of redemption. And they came out there, and Arlen was a little boy, and he remembers when the graders and the bulldozers came out and they started terracing and laying out the fields and doing all that stuff. And look at it now. What is it, 90 years later or so? The picture of fertility, the picture of everything we mean when we say a farm. I mean, my gosh, if that doesn't look like a farm, I don't know what looked like a farm. But the basic message is conservation works. You're involved in something that really works. And this is the picture of it. This is the picture of the product. This is the picture of what you believe in, I think. And I'm pleased to be part of this group and this little gathering with you all. So, what I cannot do today is speak to you at the detail level of policy. I won't pretend that I've been out there doing farming or owning land or trying to deal with all the issues that you have been. What I have been doing for the last 30 years for National Geographic is traveling the world, and a fair amount of that on agricultural issues of feeding the planet and food. And I can take you along on that journey, and I can show you a little bit about the worldwide story of food and food production and agriculture, and help put in perspective who you are and what you're involved in, and place yourself in the history of mankind and the history of the world. So I want to start someplace maybe you don't expect to start. I want to start at the beginning. We're going to go way back, 5,000 to 10,000 years ago, back to the time when most of us were still hunter-gatherers wandering the landscape, and there was a new spirit in the land. There was a new way of thinking. I'm going to take you up to the Orkney Islands off the coast of Scotland, where 5,000 years ago, the Neolithic Revolution was all the rage. This was the coming of farming, and people were thinking differently. They were settling down. They were putting up big monuments like the Stones of Stennis here. This is probably the first stone circle. This is 700 years before Stonehenge, the first stone circle in the British Isles. This was a way of saying, we're here, this is our land, it belongs to us. And they did other things. They started settling down, they started building houses. They weren't wandering around anymore. This is Scarborough. That's a house from 5,000 years ago. Not a bad house, you look. They got dressers in there and beds and a hearth in the middle and little shelves in the walls and all this kind of stuff. I joke sometimes with people that I've stayed in worse hotel rooms. This wasn't bad, These weren't mean lives they're living out there, And they were thinking about time differently. They were thinking about their ancestors in the past, and they were thinking about the afterlife and the future, and they were building tombs. Substantial tombs, big heavy-duty things, built to last, built because they thought there was a future, because they thought time went on, and that they could have some place in it, some place in that time. This is Maze Howe, wonderful, wonderful tomb. They would come in and put their bones in the little compartments there on the side, but all mixed up. So Uncle Ed's skull could be in one compartment and his femur over in another compartment, and Aunt Dorothy's toe bone mixed in over here and all this kind of stuff. So when you learn that stuff about these people, you got to still scratch your head. They were not quite like us yet, are they? But they were doing this also. That's the outside of that tomb. That's the outside of Maze Howe, that big round hinge there. They were bringing in livestock. These are islands. They were bringing cattle over in hide-covered boats. I don't know how you'd haul a cow in a hide-covered boat. I am assuming they swaddled up calves and brought them over and started having livestock there. And sheep. Sheep were very early on out there in the islands. The livestock becoming a part of their lives, grazing out there, as they do today at the Stones of Stennis Jimmy Tulloch, those are his sheep. That's Jimmy hiding behind the stone there. Jimmy Tulloch runs sheep there at the Stones of Stennis. Now, I love that fact. I asked Jimmy about the stones. I said, how do you get the grazing among the Stones of Stennis, this national, incredible old monument? And he says, well, I own them. I said, how's that work? He says, they were on the land when I bought the farm. So the Stones of Stennis were sitting on the farm when he bought it, and now he gets to graze anytime he wants out there. So out there amongst those stones, there are the sheep, still scratching their itches 5,000 years later, like they've been all those millennia in the meantime. And then they were doing this. They were planting crops, planting barley. Often they planted barley right next to the tombs for some reason. They were planting near where their ancestors had been buried. And even today, you see barley growing out there next to those tombs. Now, from that little scene, I'd like to have you fast forward with me 5,000 years from the beginnings of agriculture to our present day, when agriculture has swept across the face of the planet, made hunter-gatherers redundant, spawned cities and civilizations in its wake, remade the biosphere, remade how people live, how people think about who they are. From that time when nature was all serendipity around to us, now it is our designs that are on the land. It is we who control the look of the face of the planet. And with that growth, spawned cities and population growth. Till today, there are 7 billion of us on the planet, aiming towards 9.6 billion, maybe. That's the best probably guess by 2050. 9.6 billion. In those 35 years between now and then, we're probably going to have to raise food production by 70%, maybe double it, as we get more population and diets improve around the world. 35 years to double that population. And then something really important may happen. Population will probably reach some level, 9.6 billion, 11 billion, some number, and level off. There is that hope. Level off and then eventually start to decline. If it does, we will be witness to the second great event in human history. The first being the invention of agriculture, the second, this plateauing and a knowing whether or not we can feed all the human population before we totally wipe out the planet. That's a pretty big thing to be coming in 35 years. In 15 or 20 years, we're probably going to pretty well know what the fate is going to be, how this is going to go. All of your efforts, all the efforts of all the agricultural researchers around the world and all the farmers is going to be focused on that one big monumental task, coming in our lifetime or the lifetime of our children. Puts us in a pretty pivotal point. So think about that. 7 billion people today, 9.6 billion by 2050. That's where we live. That's where these things are going to happen, where the farms, like those farms up on St. Mary's Ridge, are going to come so incredibly important and into the fore. But remember that we've already used up 39% of ice-free land on the planet. We have some room to grow in farmland, but not enormously. This is out in the Flint Hills of Kansas, the wonderful prairie where I come from. Great grassland, beautiful stuff. But remember that grazing lands take up 12.9 million square miles of the Earth's surface. We've pretty well used a lot of the resource that we got available to us. From that time when the bison were grazing out across the prairie, out there, like here up at the Triple U Bison Ranch up in South Dakota. You might recognize those bison, actually. They were in the movie Dance with the Wolves. They filmed a lot of that movie right out there on that ranch. Until the advent of the plow, which over several thousand years transformed the face of the planet, taking grasslands and making them into bread baskets. And then after World War II, basically, the really high-powered transitions that we went through, where we really harnessed the power of petroleum to give us the energy to remake our agricultural world on a grand scale, till it becomes part of our culture, becomes part of our everyday life. You know, you probably know some of these guys standing out there at Husker Harvest Days up in Nebraska. You know, they're all out there. The announcer has just said, you know, this is the latest, greatest Case combine, John Deere combine. You know, they rev the thing up. The guys are all out there watching, and they all have lust in their hearts. You know, they all believe if they just owned that combine, their life would be fulfilled. You know, that they'd be over the peak, you know, they'd be established for the rest of their life. Lust is in their hearts there, you know. We grow a lot of corn, don't we? We've really piled it up in the streets when we have bumper crops. And this is the worldwide figures. We go 354 million tons. Now that's metric tons, so I won't bother doing the math, but metric tons. 354 million tons. China grows 218, Brazil 80. You know, so we're the big producers when it comes to corn. But that cultural bit of our lives, how we live our lives every day in this process of growing the food, you know, take a close look at these guys out there combining in Goodland, around Goodland, Kansas, you know, and you see them coming together at the end of the field, and you'll notice, see the guy on top? You know, they're coming together and they're coming at each other, you know, they just got room to get by, and he chickened out a little, didn't he? He dodged, you know. He's going to be buying the beer tonight, you know. You know, somehow this plays out in their lives every day, you know. Well, from that background, I found myself then in places like Ethiopia, and I'm out there, and these guys are harvesting barley, or oats, I'm sorry, with sickles, you know. And I'm thinking, this is the greatest drudgery in the world, but they're out there singing. And so the clue to me was that I didn't necessarily understand how they saw the world of agriculture, or how those rice harvesters out there cutting and thrashing out in the field, because that's what that guy's doing. He's thrashing rice. He's got that boat-like structure with these panels up on the side, and he takes that bundle of rice and whacks it down and thrashes the rice right out there in the field. So this is what the rice world looks like. China goes 203 million tons. India, 159. But even you see when you get down then into Indonesia, Bangladesh grows 51 million tons. Vietnam, 44 million tons. Most of it eaten there. This is why rice, you know, feeds the world. Rice is the big calorie producer of the world. But then it was fascinating to get out there in places like the Andes of Peru and see people growing potatoes in the high Andes up at 14,000 feet. And I never knew what the heck a potato field would look like in the high Andes. They're planting these potatoes out there in these fields. That's a field. It's on a 7 to 15 year crop rotation. They may not come back to that particular plot for 15 years, letting it gather nutrients. And they will be planting in that little field right there that you see, they were planting 200 different varieties of potatoes. Not in all rows, all mixed together. You know, I had no clue that they could do that. They grow, though, 1,300 varieties of potatoes down there. All of them have some purpose. Some of them are used for weddings, some of them are used for funerals, some of them for just every day, you know. All of them have a cultural purpose. All of them are part of what's going on. So who is it that grows the food in the world? When I started looking into this, I got some surprises. You know, for instance, small farmers on 2 hectares or less, 5 acres maybe, grow today over 50% of the food in the world. Large-scale farming, the kind of stuff we see here in the United States, about 30%. Regardless, they're all still doing the same basic thing that those Neolithic farmers did 10,000 years ago. They took on the basic faith that if you take some of that seed and you don't eat it and you plant it in the ground, that you can make a better future for yourself. and that you will be able to feed your children in the evening. That great gnawing fear that we all have that God forbid our children should go hungry. We still got problems. You know, I photographed these young women in Niger hauling firewood, and they were hauling firewood 10 kilometers, 6-7 miles, back for cooking wood in their village every day. Amazing journeys. We still have salination. We have all kinds of soil problems around the world in various places. This was probably my luckiest research picture ever working for National Geographic, because I have to go out and find these things, you see. And so I found the guy who was the great salt researcher, called his office out in California, I think University of Southern California, got his secretary on the line. And she said, well, what would you like to know? And I said, well, I need to find a place where I can photograph salination. And she said, just a moment. And I waited on the phone, and she came back, and she said, the professor says to go to Grand Junction, Colorado, get on Highway XYZ, set your odometer, drive 10.3 miles west, and look right. So I did it. I drove out there, I looked right, here was this. The luckiest, simplest picture I've ever had to take, probably. Still, we have those dust storms coming across the American Midwest that we thought we were done with. We've been using lots of irrigation water, of course, like out in the Ogallala Aquifer, which when I photographed this, I fully intended it to look golden because it's riches. It's money on the hoof. And I wanted it to look that way. But in so doing, we've changed the geometry of farming, changed the look of the land, as you can see it from the satellites up above, spawned huge mega feedlots and agricultural ventures all across the world. But still, at heart, at root, we still have that fear that we're not really in control, that the storms can come through our lives, storms can rumble across the plains, and we are still at the mercy of the elements, and we have to be very cautious about how we use our world in that perilous nature that it is. So, there are 4 elements I'd like to go through with you today about farming, agriculture, and some of those things, and just take you on this little tour. First of farms. Farms, this is some of those farms out there on St. Mary's Ridge. And I'd just like to point out here, one more time, a little bit of that business about what farms look like around the world. Because we think they all look like, well, I think they all look like Kansas farms, and you all think they look like Pennsylvania farms, you know. Take a look at those numbers. Farms of less than 5 acres. Central America, 63%. East Asia, 79%. Go on down the line. You can read them. United States, 4%. We are an extraordinary anomaly in the world of agriculture in the size and scale of the farming that we do. What we do here does not look like very much like what happens in many other places. Most of the places, it looks like something like this. The Jatalui Rice Terraces there in Bali, beautiful place, World Heritage Site and all this. 748 acres total, 355 farms. A lot of farms for 748 acres, a little over 2 acres each, you know, all spread out in that. It's hardly a square mile, is it, you know, and you've got that many farms tucked in there. All of them doing what they've been doing for a long, long time, you know. At the end of the season, the rice growing season, they're out there fixing the terraces. Or this is what a farm looks like in Mali, where the women gather out there after they've been picking ground nuts and harvesting them and sitting under a tree and sorting them out. This is what a farm looks like, Phil Welly Farm out in California. I don't have to tell you how this game works, do I? You got that one down, right? And you've seen it before. It might be a chicken, might be a goat, but, you know, rules are basically the same. All I'm saying is that farms look very different all around the world. But wherever you see a farm, what you basically see is a smart person trying to figure out how to make things work. When you see those windmills out there on the Watson Ranch up in Nebraska, you see the cleverness of somebody who figured out how to make the system work for him, of his resources and how he could use that most efficiently. Now, when I started on a story on the soil, I wanted to go to some place where the soil was the author of the landscape. So I went out to the Palouse of Washington. You talk about a beautiful landscape of farms and soil. This is probably it. Such wonderful undulating patterns going all across of it. And I thought about the soil as something that's very mysterious, deeply layered, something we don't know a lot about, something that we'd better figure out if we're going to go on living on this planet for a very long time. So one of the things I did was I figured out finally that I couldn't just photograph the soil profiles. That would probably put all the readers in New York City asleep instantly, you know. So what I did is finally I figured out that I could do a soil pit, and I could photograph the farmers with their soil. I could make that connection between the people who depend on this soil and the resource itself. So here's this James Duggan. He's out in Kansas. This is some of his virgin prairie. Look at the structure of that soil down there, all roots running down into it from the prairie grasses. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Then this is Cletus Reed and his grandson Sam out in Iowa. Yeah, I can show this in New York or San Francisco, and everybody says, "Oh, I see topsoil." Yeah, you don't even have to point it out. 18 inches of it there, good, rich topsoil. When they started farming there in 1870, they had 36 inches. And the remaining topsoil has about half the soil carbon left. So you can probably do the math and figure out they've been burning up their soil really pretty fast. This is John Eshelman, no-till farmer out in the Palouse of Washington. You notice he doesn't really have very much topsoil. He has to be really, really careful about how he does it. Pedro Macedo down in Brazil, he farms on a soil called Terra Preta that was made by the Native Americans, the Indians, 500 to 1,500 years ago, and we still don't know quite what they did to make it. Now, when you get over to Syria and you see Farad Kalawi at Ikrasat there, obviously the soil picture has changed dramatically, and the opportunities that they have changed dramatically. Go down the road and meet Hassoun Hariri, like I did, and he'll tell you that when he farms on that soil and he plants barley in that rocky soil. Anybody here want to plow that soil, by the way? And when he plants barley in that, he says he's living by the will of Allah. And I said, yeah, you got that right, man. I understand. I understand. And then you look at Mariama Abdoulaye in Niger, and you think of her trying to grow crops, grow food to feed her children on that kind of soil, and you understand the contrast between her existence and, say, Cletus Reed up in Iowa, and why he can grow corn at the levels he does, and why she has struggles to grow simply enough food for her children. I went on around the world looking for our problems. Soil erosion, this is probably in Shanxi province, this may be the worst soil erosion on the planet. It's incredible. It's been going on for thousands of years. See those two farmers in their field there? You'll have to probably get out your binoculars, but they are there. You see them? Okay. I went over after we got done taking this picture, I went over and talked to them, and I said, got any problems with soil erosion around here? And they said, no problems here. I guess if it's been going on for thousands of years, you kind of get used to it, you know. Well, this isn't something we should get used to, you know. This is what they have to do when they're trying to reclaim those hills. They have to make little pockets in there, get the population out there to dig these little pockets, hope that it will gain enough water to let a tree sprout grow, maybe start that process coming back. Incredibly hard work. If you go to Syria, go out to the Dead Cities area, you're talking about an area that was a bustling grouping of metropolises, Byzantine era, 600 or 700 AD. Incredible, all those cities out there, and they lost their soil. They were wonderful places. There's 100 of them scattered out across the landscape out there. And then you look at it, and you look and understand that in 600 or 700 AD, this land had topsoil on it, and it's gone. There's no wonder nobody's going to come back and farm there. The soil is gone. the opportunity is lost. When Pliny the Elder came to Palmyra in the 2nd century A.D., he said there were 2 million fig trees growing in the countryside around there. And now look at it. Of course, now look at it because ISIS has been there blowing up a bunch of this stuff. What an incredible crime. Or go to Niger and think that tree, those trees in the background there, to this mother, that's a vast improvement. A French group has been out there planting trees all across the landscape. Just having those trees that her goats can nibble on is a vast improvement. You know that there's huge room for improvement if she can feel that way. For our story, for our readers, what I really felt was I had to get down in the soil. I couldn't just photograph it from on top. I have to get down into it. They have to understand what's going on. So we did those soil profiles. I had great help from Jerry Glover at the Land Institute outside of Salina, Kansas. This is Jerry doing a root wash down in a soil pit so that we could see the difference in the soil structure of the wheat and the plants growing next to it. He grew out in 55-gallon drums a bit of prairie, took it out, did a root wash, and then we suspended it in the air and lit it all up, make it look like a spaceship, so that you could see what that root structure is like. We did it for a number of prairie grasses. There's some big blue stem, and there's switchgrass. What else we got here? Wheatgrass, Kansas rosinweed, so that you could see that structure. Now, I can show people those pictures, but you don't really understand it, I think, until you do this. We'll just take a little journey. Let's start up at the top of that Indian grass, 4 feet above ground, and start going down. Take a little journey down into the soil here. Now we're about 2 feet above ground, coming down to the earth's surface. There it is. And then take a look at that root ball. We're a foot, 2 feet underground now. An incredible root ball, an incredible structure, an incredible creature. If you think porpoises and elephants are wonderful, I think we ought to think these are pretty darn wonderful, We're 6, 7 feet underground now, 8 feet underground perhaps by now. When we get to the very tippy tip down here, we're going to be 9 feet underground. My gosh, now think of that going on out in the Kansas prairie, in the Flint Hills, for hundreds of miles in any direction. Think of that root structure, that great biomass under the soil and down there, going on all across for 100 miles across there, and you get some idea of the mass of this living system going out there, down in the soil that we depend upon so much. And all those other creatures living there, who we hardly ever think, hardly ever recognize that they're going, the earthworms. I joke sometimes that my National Geographic photographer colleagues get to do things like go to France and do street cafes in Paris, and sit there and drink wine with beautiful women, and I sit in a lab in Des Moines, Iowa with a petri dish full of earthworms for 2 days, figuring out how to photograph them, I got to where I could herd earthworms, they don't like heat and they don't like light, and I could kind of get them to move around, and all this kind of stuff, we got to be real good friends after a while. I also found up there in the lab all these soil fungi that one of the scientists was growing, and I knew soil fungi were down in the soil, but I had no idea they were beautiful like this. My gosh, when I started looking at these things, they're incredible. They look like Hubble Space Telescope pictures of the nebula off, They are incredible things that we hardly realize are down there, incredibly beautiful structures. And then you start thinking and you start looking around and saying, okay, so what's down in the soil? Well, the estimates vary, but here's one. In 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, 100 species of nematodes. I don't mean 100 nematodes, 100 species of nematodes. 1,000 species of protozoa, 25,000 species of fungi, 75,000 species of bacteria, and 7 billion total organisms. I got those numbers right? 7 billion total organisms in that. It's an incredible body of life down in there. we have a whole world to explore to start understanding. We're doing some of it, you know. We figured out some things that we can do, you know, like using some of those things to, like, make BT cotton here. You know, that's treated. That's BT GMO altered cotton on the left and non-treated on the right. So you know that we can do miraculous things. These salmon are the same age. One of them has been genetically modified, so you can do miraculous things. As it came out, we're going to be saddled for a long time, I'm afraid, with a significant part of the population who isn't very happy with all this. But I can tell you this, that when you meet a mother who can grow disease-free bananas for her kids in Africa with GMO bananas or genetically altered bananas, she is pretty sure whether she comes down on the debate. I can tell you that. So, the next bit of it, seeds. Seeds, these wonderful keys, code bearers that unlock everything that grows for us, you know. So why am I up here in the Arctic with Carrie Fowler out there freezing and looking around to see if any polar bears are sneaking up in the background? Well, because this is the site of the Svalbard Global Seed Bank, dug into this mountainside so that it will seeds deposited there as a backup for other seed banks around the world will stay viable even if all the power goes off. Even if Armageddon strikes, you'll probably have those seeds buried in that mountainside up there in Svalbard, and mankind can start again and not have lost that 10,000-year legacy of domesticated crops that we've developed. So that's what's going on. Those seeds are being taken in boxes down there into that frozen mountainside, piled up from all around the world. There's some from Kenya, there's some from Brazil, they're just all over from the United States, they're just from all over the world deposited in that thing. What's in all those boxes? Wonderful things. Incredible things. Seeds get little respect. I know that you think about them a lot when you're buying seeds, but the variety that's being stored there, they're storing 500,000 different species up there in that seed bank to think about. All of this kind of stuff, the stuff that we've developed for 10,000 years of domestication, 10,000 years of people trying to figure out how to grow a better squash or a better tomato. You know, this is up at Seed Savers in Decorah, Iowa. This is the USDA seed bank in Des Moines. Have I got that right? Ames. I hope I've got that right. Somebody from Iowa is going to correct me. I know that. And you walk down the halls, and here are, you know, jars and jars and jars full of corn seeds being stored there. But you can't, the job of keeping those seeds, of keeping that genetic heritage is very complex. You can't just put them in the jar, you know, and keep them there for 100 years. You have to keep growing them out. So you do that places like Fort Collins, you keep growing them out. If it's sunflowers you're growing, well, you can't just plant them out there in the field. The bees will go back and forth and you'll get cross-pollinated. So you have to have a cage for each species of sunflower, and you have to have a beekeeper who will haul bees around to each separate cage. Multiply that by all the crops that we try and keep available for mankind, and you get some idea of the problem. Think about wheat. There's 200,000 accessions of wheat in the seed banks around the world. If you think that we domesticated wheat, then I invite you to consider the possibility that wheat domesticated us. Because wheat made a bargain with us, 10,000 years ago in Central Asia there, that if we would spread it all over around the world, if we would kill off its enemies, if we would make the soil fertile for it in all those places, if we would use it and it alone to feed us for our bread, you know, it would be our partner. And that is what has happened. Wheat now covers 870,000 square miles of the planet, to the exclusion of all the plants that used to be growing out there where the wheat is now. 870,000 square miles is 10 times the size of Great Britain. That's a lot of the planet covered with one crop. Here's the facts on wheat. Wheat, China, the number one grower of wheat, 122 million tons. India, 80 million tons. United States, 57 million tons. I was surprised when I saw that. I had grown up on a farm where we grow wheat, and I swore I didn't think that anybody else could grow as much wheat as we did, you know. So why do you need 200,000 accessions of wheat? Isn't there, don't we have enough varieties? Well, because you're going to run into this. You're going to run into something like UG99, wheat stem rust, which developed in Uganda in 1999, hence the name, and is about 80 to 90% fatal to wheat. And it's spreading out from Uganda through Africa over to Yemen. If it were to get to India, you can see the consequences. So what you do is you start calling all the seed banks of the world and say, send us anything that you think has resistance to wheat rust, and you send it to Ethiopia, and they start growing it out in fields all around that infected feed, and you try and find some species that got some resistance to that wheat rust. And when you do, you start breeding it into your wheat, and you start trying to get that into all of the world's population of wheat varieties. That's why we go back to places like Ethiopia, where some of those grains were first domesticated, and try and collect those wild ancestors of some of those crops that we depend upon. I had thought when I was growing up, by the way, that building a haystack was a laborious job that would take several days. These guys did it in about 15 minutes. They're really good. And by hand, of course, you see, it was just one more instance in which I got schooled on the fact that local people with local knowledge know how to do stuff, and they can do it very well. Anyway, that's one of the reasons we keep all those tomato ancestors in seed banks around the world. Why me as a photographer, when I'm doing a story like this, and I hear that Seed Savers is going to have their tomato day, and they're going to have 47 varieties of tomatoes out there for tasting and all that kind of stuff. I get really excited, When it comes to apples, of course, well, you can't just keep the seeds, right? You have to probably keep them in tissue cultures in seed banks. When it comes to livestock, it's a different thing too. I was interested in the phrase that I heard when I was doing that story, that you have to eat them to save them. If they aren't useful, nobody's going to keep that breed going, I went to the Welsh Agricultural Show, which is a great fair if you ever want to go to one of those things, looking for something like this. These guys standing there. And when I saw these guys standing there with their cattle, I thought, this is an old partnership, isn't it? These guys have been hanging around for a long time, maybe decades, maybe thousands of years. They like each other. We're all part of the same system going on here. They're all happy to be out there at the show. This is what's been going on for 10,000 years with animal breeding. Smart people looking very carefully at each generation of livestock, trying to eke out a little more advantage for one breed over another. I like this Welsh white hog there. I liked it particularly because he bends his knee just the same way the farmer bends his knee. They must have hung around with each other for a really long time. But we're partners now. We and the horses, the cowboys and the horses, all of us are those domesticated breeds are inseparable partners. We can't survive one without the other. They have become a part of our lives. They've become part of our very fabric of being. And we need them not just for that sort of relationship, but we need all of those breeds because maybe you're going to find a Sheko cattle and it turns out that it has a resistance to a commonly carried disease carried by mosquitoes. And you're going to be really glad you found that small pocket of 2,400 Sheko cattle, that kind of stuff. And then you're going to find this little bit going on. See that little girl walking home with her mother? They're carrying sorghum home for supper. And that little girl's 3 or 4, something like this? She's already looking around at her mother to see how it's done. Well, this is the little bits of pockets of knowledge being passed one generation on, one to the next. This is how it happens out on farms. This is how our knowledge of agriculture gets passed on. So I want to talk finally about farmers. Farmers are the vessels of the knowledge. Farmers are the people who embody this great historical heritage of food, agriculture, and how we feed ourselves. This is Scott Dowling. Scott is maybe the biggest wheat farmer in America, family farmer, 50,000 acres, all in one contiguous plot up there in South Dakota. In 2012, I think he told me, he grew 1.3 million bushels of wheat. The next year, not so good. Drought, I think he said he had to plow up 24,000 acres of the 50,000 acres. It goes up and down, doesn't it? You know, it's a roller coaster. Okay, I want you to look at Scott. Does anybody look more like, you know, what you would think of as a successful farmer who knows how to grow lots of food? Okay, now I want you to show you some other folks, some other farmers I respect a lot. These are villagers in Jakati in Bangladesh threshing rice with a foot-powered treadle out there in the field. Now, here's the amazing thing about this, these two pictures together. These farmers on their land there in Bangladesh can probably grow more per acre than Scott Dowling can in South Dakota. And it's a pretty, when you say it that way, it's pretty surprising. Now, I've loaded the cards a little bit because they can grow a couple, 3 crops of rice every year, and they can put tomatoes out there on every little verge between the fields, and they can put, when they're not growing rice, they can put fish in the rice paddies, and they got cattle, and they can do all kinds of things. So I'm loading it a little bit. But remember that the United States grows 57 million tons of wheat, and Bangladesh grows 51 million tons of rice. So they're not amateurs. They know what they're doing, you know, and they grow a heck of a lot of rice. But those people, wherever they are particularly knowledgeable about that particular place. They know how it works there, and they know when somebody's selling them snake oil, and they know when something might actually hold promise. So getting knowledge to them is essential. Juana Valerio, up there harvesting potatoes in Peru. The amazing thing was to see Juana pick up a 70-kilo bag of potatoes and walk down a 45-degree slope at 14,000 feet. I could hardly carry my camera bag, you know, crying out loud. It was amazing to see that. Or Puck, you know, planting rice. This is a back-breaking work. You're bent over for hours a day, sticking rice down into the mud there in Bali. These farmers were growing prawns in a little pond next to the farmhouse that they could sell for cash. That was one of their main cash crops. They could do it. Chalachaka here, he's growing teff. We grow a little teff in the United States, not much. Ethiopia, it's a big crop, you know. All of these people know something. George Naylor sure knows how to grow soybeans out in Iowa, I can tell you that. But Basama Kamara, he knows exactly why he wants that really tall variety of sorghum. He wants those tall stalks because he feeds the stalks to his cattle, and he can make fencing out of the tall stalks that are dry. You know, he's got reasons for why he does what he does. Alexander Salo growing cabbages there in Ukraine. Wonderful farmer. Boy, wonderful cabbages. She's incredible. And I can tell you this, as a photographer, when you find the Alexandras of the world, your job is done. You don't have to be a very good photographer. You just stand in front of Alexandra and point the camera at her, and she smiles, and you click the button, and bam, there's a picture, you know. Anything she smiles at, you know, it turns into a good picture. She was great. I loved meeting these people. Shawakena Wubi, you know, they're out there, here they are, winnowing wheat in the wind. Mariam Keita, harvesting peanuts there in Mali, passing on that tradition at the very first years of life to her child. All of these people are the vessels, the vehicles by which that knowledge of a particular place gets carried on. They will be our partners as we work to feed the planet. They are part of this great tradition of sharing knowledge that you're doing right here today. This is part of where you sit from my viewpoint. You sit as key players in the business of feeding our planet, of maintaining our planet, so that once we get all those people on it, we still have a planet worth living on. And without that knowledge that you share, that these people that you're looking at share, without that being carried on by each of you, we are lost. So thank you so much for letting me share this with you today, and I wish you all the best for your time here together. Thank you so much.
Okay, I asked Jim to stay up, and if y'all have some questions, we'll have Katie and Chris that would come around with the mic, so we'd open it up to a few questions to them if you'd like.
Speak up. If I have bad ears, but they're getting better.
I see a question
Yeah,
over here.
back here. How many miles have I traveled? Well, let's see, 5 round the world trips and then a bunch more. So, yeah, I don't know. I've got a pretty good passport, though. It's pretty worn out and full of stuff. It's always a great journey doing these stories, because on each one I have to start figuring out not just where there might be the pictures, but really what the pictures ought to be of. And right now I'm starting in on a story on the origins of agriculture. It's got some of its roots in that stuff I showed you of Orkney up there. That's what really got me going on it. The origins of agriculture 5,000 to 10,000 years ago, how it happened, where it happened. Turns out we thought we knew. We don't, not quite so sure anymore. You know, we're getting smarter, but we're trying to figure out. And then what it means, and how it affects what we ought to do in the future. Did we leave any varieties of grains behind that we should have domesticated when we were just happening to do this? Should we rethink how we deal with livestock? Should we take some lessons about food? Because one of the most fundamental things that comes out of that little research there is that actually hunter-gatherers had an easier life. We all thought that when farming started up, you know, our lives got easy and all this. Turns out not quite the case. Hunter-gatherers had an easier life, and so you have to start saying, so why did they start farming? And then what happened when they did? And one of the things we got was this huge population explosion. And we have to figure out how to do that, or else we just growing more food alone simply very often fuels more population, and you don't get ahead. So anyway, anything else? Pardon me? Do I have a video of my presentation? Would you buy one? Okay, all right. I do not at present, but we are working on a number of ways of doing more work dealing with just this subject. And so I hope the answer, if you ask me that 2 years from now, I hope it would be yes. At present, no.
I guess technical type question. When you travel the world or whatever, taking your pictures, how many lenses do you take? You know, your camera equipment. Do you take one lens, one camera, or just more technical kind of issue, I guess. Or
Repeat
question.
that for me.
What kind of equipment do you bring with you on your trip to take your pictures? How many cameras?
How many cameras and stuff? Can be a lot. It used to be that National Geographic photographers like Jim Stanfield would go out on assignment and he'd have 19 cases of equipment. I have specifically tried to avoid that. I've tried to make my photography more about the connection with the people. And so when I did all those portraits of farmers that you saw, that was all out of one backpack, a lighting kit, and cameras and lenses and everything like this, because I just knew that I couldn't get to the places I needed to get, if I had to drag a big crew with me. So usually, basically, but the most fundamental answer is that the kit gets modified for the job. So, for instance, when we're up there in Orkney and we're doing all those pictures of those monuments at night, that happened to be my next door neighbor from Lindsborg, Kansas, Jim Turner, and I, with 2 flashlights out there, And so we packed a lot of batteries and a lot of flashlights, not too many cameras. But as it goes, each story and the demands of what the picture should be comes first, and then you start figuring out what's the gear to get to it and whatnot. I'll probably be buying a drone pretty soon, if not a helicopter. Who knows? So.
I think we have a question right over here.
Yeah.
I was going to ask there we go. I was going to ask the pictures like from Bangladesh and those, you know, they're obviously producing a lot of food for themselves. Have you shown them pictures? Do they see the things that you've done, shown pictures of? Do you show them pictures of the United States, of what, you know, like Wisconsin pictures? You know, there's a lot of difference, obviously, in the cultures, and I just wondered if they had any concept of what was beyond their local scope.
Yeah. Give it to me again, Earl, sir.
Basically wants to know, have they observed what you show here from the United States? And well, outside of their arena, do you show them what you take?
Have I been able to show this to all those folks there? Directly answer, no. One of the, but it brings up a really interesting question, because yes, that whole spreading back and forth of information about how it works here and how it works there is dramatically important, which is kind of the same question as research and extension. How do you get the information out to all those people? Well, what I noticed when I was in Ethiopia was going out with an extension agent to a farm, and we drove for 2 hours outside of Addis to get out to a farm where he was there. And we were up on a ridge. It was the ridge where Whoopi, the guy they were winnowing wheat up there, okay, up on the ridge. And you're standing on this ridge, and I'm looking down, and I can see 10 miles in any direction, probably. So do the math of the area, if you will. And all of that 10 miles down the valleys beneath me was covered with farms. And each of those farms was 2 to 3 acres. And I'm doing the math in my own head back from my days in Kansas, you know, going 640 acres and 2 acres each. That's 300 farms per square mile. And how many square miles am I looking at? And then you go, I could be looking at 10,000 farms or something? I mean, incredible number of farms. How do you get information? Even if you have the answer to a specific farming question, how do you get that information to 10,000 different farmers who don't watch television or don't have computers in the side room, you know? That question of the complexity of getting this information all over the world to all the people who need it, I think is incredible. What I do know, though, is that here in the United States and in Great Britain, we've had 150 to 200 years of really good agricultural research and really good extension. And if anything, if you kind of look at success of agriculture around the world, if there's any common denominator, I would have to say that's one of them. You know, that's one of the top 5 list of things that made a difference agriculturally around the world, is that legacy of 150 years or so of research and extension. Yeah.
Let's give Jim a big hand.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Earl.
Quite interesting, and I'm sure we could go on for the rest of the day asking questions. So we really appreciate that type of insight, what's going on in the world, and how the American activity, the United States activity compares. It always amazes me to observe that type of presentation. So at this time, I'd like to call up Mr. Johnny Regler to come up and give us a few tips on this evening's activity. It's an item we call the auction item. So is Johnny in the room that maybe he could come up and give us a little update on what's going to go on? He's not in? Oh, here he comes. Okay. Very good. So just start loosening up your pocketbook here. That's all we're trying to do here to get you ready for this evening. And Johnny's going to give you an idea of what some of the items that are available and how he's going to teach you how to raise your hand to spend those dollars. Right, Johnny?
That's right.
All right.
Thank you, Earl. This is part of your reason for being here is tonight at 7 o'clock, we want to invite you all back into this room. We're going to feed you, and then we're going to get in your pockets, because it takes money to do the things that our leadership does, not only in Washington, but all over the United States. Tonight, a very rare opportunity, and I want to where's Gene? I want to make sure I get this correct. In the past, Case IH has been very gracious, and they've offered a tractor, big tractor, to whomever purchases it for 100 hours, and then
your district would get that same tractor for another 100 hours. It's my understanding this year, Case IH has doubled the offer. 2 tractors are going to be offered tonight, and these tractors are going to be at whomever buys them, whichever size tractor that you would like to use. Is that correct? So, I think it brings into play the whole room. If you need just a little spray tractor, here's your chance to have a brand new Case IH. After you're done with it for 100 hours, your district gets it for 100 hours. Very cool. We're going to do it 2 times. We have a lot of different items that we're going to offer from all around the United States and some of our friends from around the world that are here. And everything is on display, but back here at 7 o'clock tonight, we invite you to come. Why do you want to do this? Folks, it takes money. All these projects that these guys have talked about. And, you know, I took a note what Jeremy was talking about. He said that this year they gained $1.5 billion. Think about the small amount that we're going to raise tonight turned into $1.5 billion. That's really a great investment on your dollar, okay? The last thing I'm going to tell you is something's going to happen between now and next time we meet. It only happens 44 times in the history of the United States, and that is not the election, but the fact that we have a sitting president that's going to be leaving office. Those of you that understand politics, a lot of times there are things that sitting presidents have on their agenda that didn't get passed necessarily the way they wanted. They try their darndest to push them on us. So what I'm trying to explain to you is for the last 7 years for this administration, Earl and all the previous presidents have been on offense, fighting for you. This year, I have a feeling we're going to be on defense to protect what we have so that those things we don't get shoved underneath the bus. So that's why we need money tonight to keep this group in the forefront. The last thing I'm going to tell you, this group is the most diverse group of any that you will sit in for a national group. There are big folks here, farm lots and lots of acres. There are folks in the room that's got 3 and 4 acres, and that's how they make their livelihood. There's livestock people here, there's grain people here, there's landscape people here. This is the most diverse group that you'll ever be around, and for that reason, this group carries a lot of weight in Washington, D.C. And if you don't think so, talk to these past presidents. They will tell you they actually do listen to you. So I invite you back at 7 o'clock tonight.
All right. Thank you, Johnny, and we really appreciate you being here with us, and we're looking forward, excuse me, to an exciting evening in the auction. I also want to point out Tim Palmer. Tim, stand up. Tim's been our auction chairman and has done an excellent job, so let's give him a hand. Okay, before I recess here this morning, I have a few quick announcements, if my voice hangs with me. First, we would like to thank the following for their sponsorship of this meeting: Agri-Drain Corporation, Bear Crop Science, Bob Warner, Case IH, John Deere, Monsanto, National Farmers Union, Syngenta, Soil Health Institute, U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Sugar, USDA NRCS, and Vertison. Next, if you haven't already, make sure to stop by the Conservation Expo right out the door. As you came in, you get the opportunity to visit. This is being sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service again this year, so thank you, Forest Service, for this. And also to all of the exhibitors that are there and participating, we want to thank you. We're also excited once again with the District Share Fair. This is an excellent opportunity to network and hear ideas to fellow conservationists across the country. The Share Fair will be going on this morning at 10:45 to 11:45, the Crystal Ballroom 1 and 2, and that's right across the hallway as you go out the door here this morning. Finally, we have an NACD display set up in the foyer near the registration right outside these doors. And this is a great backdrop for you to take photos and bring back home and use in the media. We also have available on a template for a press release on our website that you can draw from and modify to fit your needs to get a little advertisement for your travel here to this national organization meeting. So, and also remember that badges are going to be required for attendance to all the sessions here today and tomorrow. So make sure you're carrying your badge or your name tag with you into the district share fair, the leadership luncheon later today, and the live auction tonight. One quick housekeeping announcement for all of the past presidents that are here, and also our sponsors. If you take a minute and come up to the stage after I recess this meeting, we'd like to take some photos with you this morning. So there being no further business, I now declare this opening session of NACD 70th Annual Meeting in recess, and we'll see you around the sites and back here tomorrow morning. So thank you, enjoy the rest of the meeting, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Greatest contribution is the ones you leave behind, raised on the ways and gentle kindness of a small town southern man.